not that many. Okay, come on, after lunch, right? So we're going to talk about security, and I have to tell you this, well, the big challenge is keeping everybody awake after lunch, but the big challenge for us is that security right now really is the most important thing that your company can be thinking about right now. It really is. So if you're in the security business, I know I've met a lot of you at the book signing table dedicated to security. We have a big challenge in front of us to get business leaders who don't understand technology to understand security. So with that, we're going to get into a few things here. Let's see if I can learn how to use this thing here. Okay? So, digital money, right, is coming, cybercurrencies, but I'm not going to talk about blockchains and all that. That's the next session after me. What I want to talk about is the value of data. And data is money. I want to start out, though, with a little short story about a time when I used to work for a bank. That's where I started my career. I used to work for Bank of America. I was in the IT department. And it was long enough ago that we were installing the very first networks and PCs. I was working on commercial lending applications with the goal of bringing down the transaction time from weeks to a couple of days. I was talking to a commercial loan officer recently. She said now it's back out to weeks and months to get approval. But I was working with a guy named Fred, and he's a friend of mine now, but he was a supplier. So I'm in IT. This supplier comes to me, and he wants to do all my cabling. He works for a small business. It's about $1 million business. And I spent some time with them, and I thought, well, they would do a good job for us, and hired them to come cable our business buildings up. And over the course of 1 year, his company grew from 1 million to 5 million. Amazing growth, right? Huge for a small business. And this guy's an entrepreneur. He's always looking for opportunity, always looking for business deals. And so as his company started to explode and grow, he started to think, how can I make it even bigger? How can I go international? And he started bringing in people to his business. And I remember I went to visit his office. He had moved from a little tiny hole in the wall to a large, really nice uptown kind of building facility. And I went in there, and there were guys working like crazy, international deals, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And he said to me, how would you like to come work for me? And I thought, wow, that'd be I'd like to do that. I'm kind of an entrepreneurial thinker. I like thinking about stuff like that. And I said, yeah, I'd like to do that. And he said, well, we were thinking about starting up a networking company, a computer, networking company. This is back in the late 80s. So he said, what we need is a business plan. So I said, okay. So I went off and I started working on a business plan. I was early on out of college. I didn't really know what a business plan was. So I got in touch with a friend of mine, Bill, and we started working on a business plan. So we had some stuff together. We had numbers, spreadsheets, planning. So he invited us to dinner. So my friend and I, Bill, are going to go have dinner with Fred, and he's going to bring his financial guy with him, who he recently hired on. So we go to dinner. Well, actually, before we went to dinner, my wife said to me, I really want to go. So I don't know about you, but my wife doesn't know anything about it. They're recording this, aren't they? They are. Okay, well, cut this piece out. So my wife really doesn't know anything about business. So I said, you don't really want to go to this. It's going to be boring. We're going to be talking about numbers and stuff. Well, she insisted. So I said, okay. After all, it is us getting into this business, right? It's a new venture, a lot of risk. So we go to dinner, and after dinner, we're on the way home. My wife says to me, I don't trust that financial guy. And I said, well, how do you know that? You're just there for an hour or two with him, and you didn't even really talk to him. And she said, I could tell that he's dishonest. I thought, that's crazy. So she said, listen, if you're friends with Fred, you ought to tell him. I said, how am I going to tell him that his financial guy is not honest? How would I know that? How can I make that assumption? She goes, I'm telling you, he's dishonest, you need to tell Fred. So for the next several weeks, she kept telling me to tell Fred. Well, then I lost touch with Fred. We didn't do the deal. The business plan never really happened. I went back to the bank, did my job. And a few months later, I get a call from Fred. I said, hey, how you doing? He said, I lost my business. I said, what do you mean you lost your business? He said, well, remember that financial guy? And I said, yeah. And he goes, that guy stole my business. He took the whole thing out from under me. I didn't know what was happening. He had me signing all these forms and everything and going through all this financial stuff to get investment people in there and all this stuff to grow the company. And now it's gone. And his whole company, he lost everything. He lost everything. And I could go on with other stories like that. Now, this didn't happen online, but I bring this up because it's easy to do something like that, but now that we're all online, it's a lot easier. And as people who work in finance, work in banks, work in lending, right, your companies do all that. And the lifeline of your company, your biggest problem, I believe, today is the threat against small business, against all your customers, the medium-sized business, the small businesses that don't really understand security, and you're dealing with them, and they don't really understand what they're doing. So I want to go into 3 things. I've got a series of threats. I want to talk about 7 things that are happening that your executive leadership needs to know, like the non-technical ones, and that your customers need to know. However, the people that interface with customers can get the word out. They need to know. First of all, we talked earlier, and I appreciate Mr. Giuliani being here. By the way, I'm also a native New Yorker, so it's kind of funny that you had 2 New York keynotes today. I'm not sure how that happened, but here we are. But companies obviously are going digital, right? They're digitizing everything. As Giuliani said this morning, everything's in the cloud, government side, but also the business side. And if it's not, nobody's going to do business with that company. When I started in IT, there were statements made like, we're not going to let our employees use the internet. How could that work? Today, if somebody came out of college, they wouldn't even take a job with a company that doesn't use the internet. Or companies that say you can't use your own device in work. Right? Can that really happen? Companies have to be digital. People want to be digital. People don't want to go to the bank anymore. They want to work digitally. I know when I went to visit my bank, when I opened up my business account, they were showing me all the beautiful lobbies and all the different meeting rooms and all this. And I said to her, I don't need to see all that. I'm never coming back here. And she looked at me like I was kind of strange. And I said, I don't have time to come to the bank. Everything I do is online. It's at night. It's on weekends. I want to know, are your support people there on weekends, like at 10 o'clock at night? That's what I need to know. I travel around the world, and when I have time to do banking, it's like weird hours. And she said, oh, yeah, we do all that, right? Companies have to be digital. And there's a lot of stuff happening right now where everything is being attached to the internet, stuff that we never really thought about before, right? And then we've got some big issues out there, which I'm sure you've heard about. One of the big ones that strikes me is the Bank of Bangladesh, considered to be the biggest bank heist in history. Hopefully you know about this, right? $80 billion. North Korea blamed for it. Of course, they don't admit that. Who knows if they really did it. But there's evidence that says that they did. But it only takes a few minutes to do something like this. And they mentioned this morning all the different hacks with tens of millions of identities being stolen, but you probably heard about Yahoo, right? 500 billion identities taken. Now, Yahoo is a bad one, right? Because almost everybody has a Yahoo account, and almost everybody who has a Yahoo account uses their password for more than one thing, Yahoo and their bank. That's the way that works. 500 million. There's only 300 million people in the United States. And a lot of them would be ineligible to have accounts. Babies, seniors that are, beyond the computer and in an assistant home or something. So if you look at numbers like that, it's astounding. Now, of course, that's an international number, but it's a big number. The FDIC being hacked and covered up in 2012. That's kind of scary. And then the NSA. Hopefully you read about this in the Wall Street Journal. NSA cyber crime tools or cyber warfare tools being taken and put for sale online. This is bad news. And then if we look down a little bit further, we see some of the big things happening. I'm going to get into those in a little bit. Just kind of news. It's always in the news. You can't even keep a presentation like this up to date because every day there's something in the news. And the fact is we're in a war right now. But because there's not a bunch of body bags coming back from overseas and all kinds of war-torn countries, the thought is, for most business people, that everything looks okay. Right? Probably a lot of the people you work with look around and think everything looks fine, but it's not. So I want to show you 10 things that are happening that we really need to take note of. And most of them are things you might not have thought about too much, because they're not the typical things we talk about in a security conference. But then I want to show you one thing that I think is at the root of it. Now, Mr. Giuliani showed us something this morning which relates to it. And it's kind of interesting because we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but it's very related. But this one thing you'll see is misunderstood. And if we can fix this one thing, as Mr. Giuliani said this morning, we can scale down the problem quite a bit. I'd say probably 80% of the problem would go away if we understood this one thing. In fact, a lot of the physical violence we've seen in this country over the past year is because people misunderstand physical security. But it's the same principles of physical security and digital security. Same principle. And when you start throwing away the core foundational principles of security, suddenly security doesn't work. And so I want to go into that. And then finally, at the end, what time we have, I have some things that need to be instilled into your organization. Instilled into the leadership, instilled into the management, and instilled into the average office worker that is creating and using data. So let's get started. I want to start here by just talking a little bit about what's happening in the organization very quickly. The CIO, how many people here are CIOs? Okay, we got a few CIOs, okay. So the CIO, and you might report up to the CIO, or you might not, depending on how your organization is structured, is responsible for IT, right? They're looking at, but it used to be an operational job. It used to be computer rooms and uptime and data center stuff, and it still is. But today, if you look at the CIO job, if you've been reading about the transformation taking place in the CIO office, this person is responsible for strategic decisions. Decisions that grow the company, things that change the way the company works. So it used to be infrastructure related, but today when you say CIO or think of the CIO, you ought to think of somebody who's thinking about how do we brand our organization, how do we grow this organization. Everything that's done for marketing, for customer experience, they're all technical decisions now. They didn't used to be, but they are now. Everything that any business does to grow itself is a technical decision, and it all falls under the CIO. Now, meanwhile, this person is being hit with cost and compliance and, do we have the right kind of people on board, the talent? What's our competition doing? And of course, security, what's happening with that. And meanwhile, the end users out there, the people who are trying to conduct banking business or any kind of business, are seeing all these advertisements and being hit with vendors who are selling them on cloud and big data analytics and mobility and anything else that's digital that would ease their job. And it's kind of a strenuous thing because this person has to keep all this together. Now, if I can just point out, and by the way, you should have that book, Digital Money. Hope you have that one. If you haven't gotten one, there might still be some left. But this one diagram here, called the Impact Likelihood Graph, is what your company needs. So if you don't get anything else out of this 1 hour, this is the thing you should be delivering to the people that run your organization, your business. The Impact Likelihood Graph. Now, let me explain just briefly what this is. It's a measure of risk. Okay, it's very simple though, and I want to use some non-technical analogies today just to give you some things to explain to people who are non-technical in your organization. Impact versus likelihood. I was, I guess 3 years ago, I was not feeling well. I had been eating all kinds of bad things for months, since Thanksgiving to Christmas. And it was Christmas Day, and eating pies and cakes and all kinds. I probably weighed 35 pounds more than I do today. I was getting out of shape. And I didn't feel well. In fact, I thought I was going to die. And that night, I laid down to go to sleep. My wife laid down next to me, and she was into a good dream. And I was tossing and turning, all sweaty and feeling like it. And I thought, man, I wonder if I'm going to have a heart attack. I really felt bad. And I thought, I don't want to tell my wife, because my wife is a healthcare professional. And healthcare professionals, whenever you mention anything about not feeling well, get really excited about it. So I could just imagine that all of a sudden I wouldn't be eating anything good anymore. Like, I'd be living on salads the rest of my life. And I didn't want to do that. And then I thought, well, if I just die tonight, it'll be okay, because then I'll be dead, and I don't have to worry about it. But then I thought, that would be selfish. So I got to do something here. So I'm tossing and turning, and around 4 in the morning, I got up and said, okay, I got to go consult my health advisor, which is Google. Right? So I bet some of you have done this. So I go down to my office, and I'm Googling, what does it feel like to have a heart attack? What are the symptoms? What am I looking for? And I'm reading through these lists, and I come up with one. It's got like 10 things to look for. And I'm reading through these 10 things, and sure enough, I have all of them. And then I get to the bottom, there's a little paragraph that says, most husbands don't like to tell their wives about this. Like, yeah, no kidding. And then it says, but you need to. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go tell my wife. Now, I should mention that I also have 7 kids. And so I was thinking, man, I got, my wife with 7 kids and 3 dogs. It's just going to be bad news if I don't do something. So, I went in to visit my wife. And she knew right away there was a problem. I mean, she could tell yesterday was miserable. But today she knew there was a problem. And so she said right to me, are you not feeling well? And I said, well, not really that well. And she said, are you getting ready to have a heart attack? How do you know that? I don't know. And she said, we need to go to the hospital. So we're racing down the road, we get to the hospital, and I'm kind of like shy about this. I don't want to go in there and announce this to everybody. It's kind of embarrassing. It could just be indigestion. I don't know. So we get into the waiting room, and my wife said, we got a cardio patient! And I'm like, oh, no, how embarrassing. So then they rush out with the gurney, and they're wheeling me back, and they're putting all these things in my body. Extracting blood and all kinds of samples of me. And they kept me there all morning. Tests are coming back. And it didn't look that bad. I hadn't had a heart attack, and I wasn't about to have one necessarily, but things looked okay. My cholesterol was too high. I was a little bit overweight. Started a workout routine, by the way. I'm eating lots of salads now. See what's going to happen. And I didn't feel that bad, And by the time lunch came, I'm ready to go. Like, go have a burger or a pizza or something. But the lady comes in, the nurse, and she says, Mr. Stelzel, we're going to keep you overnight to watch you. Overnight? I've never been in a hospital overnight. I don't want to do that. But my wife is like, no, you need to do this. We need to make sure. We need to know, And so I said to my wife, well, is this covered by insurance if the ambulance takes me to the other hospital? And she goes, I don't know. So she calls the ambulance or calls the insurance company. And comes back and she says, it's going to cost $1,500 to take an ambulance ride. $1,500. Like, it's not covered. So I said to the nurse, well, I'm not paying $1,500 to go in an ambulance. She said, well, you have to go because you're under our care. And I said, well, I'm not spending $1,500. So then she just ignored me and left, just walked out. Now this is why they put that intravenous thing in your arm, because I can't leave. Right? They got me. So I'm laying there helpless, hooked into the thing, and then the doctor comes in. And she says, Mr. Stelzel, you have to go. The ambulance will be here in 5 minutes, get ready. And I said, I'm not spending $1,500. If you want to spend the $1,500, I'll go. I'm not spending $1,500. So then she said, well, you have to go. And I can see we're not getting it. We're just going back and forth. So I had to bring out the impact likelihood graph. I said, let me show you something here. This is how this works. See, this morning, or now, you're telling me all these things. Like she started telling me about my life, and I might die, and my wife won't have a husband, and my kids won't have a father, and all this stuff. And it's all impact stuff. It's all important. But I said to her, we might get hit by a nuclear weapon right now. But I don't see us running. And so she said, well, yeah. And then I said, look at the likelihood side of this. See, likelihood is what we really care about. This morning, I thought the likelihood was 95% that I was going to die, and I was willing to do anything. But not anymore, because now I'm sitting at like 2%. So I'm not spending $1,500. And she got it. It clicked. But this is what executive management needs. If a CEO or a CFO is going to approve some big budget for something new, they need to know what the likelihood is. You can't walk in the door and say, we might get hacked. Server might go down. We might lose data. We might get hit with ransomware. Like we might get hit with a nuclear weapon. None of that really matters until somebody can give me a measure of likelihood. What's the likelihood that your company will get hacked this year? And I don't know if you know the answer to that question. But it's not the same answer for everybody sitting here right now. It has to do with how you conduct business, how you got your security set up, what your people know about security, your end users, your technical people, the kind of technology you use. It has a lot to do with a lot of stuff. And you know what? Most assessments never deliver this. Most assessments never give us the likelihood because too many security people have said it can't be measured. But the truth is it needs to be measured. Now, let's take a look at these issues that are pushing that likelihood up. Alright? The first one, I've got 7 of them, but the first one is probably the most powerful one, the one that needs to really be thought about. Because this is the one that just keeps being left out of so many assessments. I can assess all day long, do all these penetration tests and vulnerability assessments and look at technology, but the fact is that somebody on the phone can get in just by calling up somebody on the business side and pretending to be somebody, pretending to be you or whatever they are. But if you look at some of the stuff that is happening, you know, getting people to open up stuff that's ransomware, right? That was mentioned this morning. It's a big deal and it's getting bigger, right? Cato, corporate account takeover. This is likely the biggest threat that your customer base has today, Cato. Somebody comes in and sends an email to somebody in their organization, accounts payable, and says, wire money to somebody. And what do? They do it, right? Email came from the boss. So they send the money. But the account is fake and the email's been spoofed. They just send it off. Invoice redirect fraud. It's another big one, right? Supplier sends an invoice in, you pay it. I mean, you don't do a lot of research, you pay it. But what if the invoice is sent by somebody fraudulently, somebody that you do business with all the time? This is happening every day. Every single day. And it's a huge, huge problem. And the malware out there, right? It's just constantly changing. It's like antivirus software doesn't even really matter anymore. Number 2 is the bring your own device fad. Now, I'm not against bringing your own device. I recognize that nobody wants to carry 2 or 3 phones on their waist. They're just not going to do it. I do laugh at people who have 2 phones. So if you do, I think it's funny. However, what's happening? Do you remember back in the old days of IT when it took weeks, months? I used to work in production control in the data center for Johnson & Johnson. It took 6 months to get programs written and moved over into production. Why? Because they were tested over and over. Everything had to be perfect. They had to work. Today, how do we get applications? Pull out our phone. You know, I need something. I need a weight loss app. You know, so I look for one. Oh, there's one. It's downloaded. Oh, this one takes too long to download. It's taking more than 60 seconds. Forget that one. Let's get a different one. You know? And if it doesn't download in less than a minute, I don't even want it. But all the people that work in your organization do this every day on equipment that they both work on and play on. They're downloading apps for everything. They're going into the cloud for everything. And they don't care if IT approves it or not. They just want to get their job done. People believe that they are their own IT department now. And this is going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. Especially as the millennial age gets older. It's just going to be worse. Now, social media, this is my favorite one. Not because social media is bad. I'm not against social media. I'm not telling you you shouldn't use social media. But there's some interesting things happening in social media that I go into great detail on in my book, so I won't too much right now. But I do want to give you a few tidbits here that I think are fascinating and misunderstood by almost everybody I talk to. Now, Facebook. Facebook is valued at around 78 billion or something like that, right? Now, what do they have? that's worth that much money? A few computers at a data center? Like, what does Facebook own? There's no brick and mortar, no infrastructure, no sales, except for marketing ads. They have data. They have data. And if you look at data aggregation technology today, are you aware that there's about 4 major aggregators, and there's a few other smaller ones, but there's 4 major data aggregators in this country, and they are buying our data. And Facebook isn't one of them, but Facebook is collecting data. Now, how does Facebook know how much money you make? Who here has set up an advertisement in Facebook? A paid ad? Anybody? Probably nobody, but anybody? Okay, a few people have, right? When you go in there, for those of you who haven't, when you go in there, you can specify just about any criteria. I want a male that makes $30,000 to $60,000 a year, that drives a pink Cadillac, and lives in a brick house, and owns his own business, and likes to build models. Now, how does the Facebook guy know that? Deep machine learning. Deep machine learning has the ability to take aggregated data and figure stuff out about you. And these data aggregators are buying all kinds of data. Everything you shop for, everything you search for, every place you go, your car tracks your GPS, your phone, Google apps, everything. Your car, new cars, check how much you weigh. Did you know that? And store that data. Like, do you want your car to know how much you weigh? It does. And these data aggregators buy this. So a data aggregator might have between 5,000 and 15,000 different facts about you. That is way more than your spouse will ever know about you. I mean a lot of stuff. Everything you've ever done online or is digitally recorded that you didn't know about, it's all aggregated. It knows what kinds of illnesses you might have that you wouldn't want anybody to know about. It knows what kinds of activities you wouldn't want anybody to know about. It knows all your secrets. It knows everything about you. And then it can surmise things that you wouldn't have expected, like how much money you make, what you like, what you believe, what your religious preferences are, what your political preferences are, everything about you. Sexual orientation, fetishes, I mean all kinds of weird stuff. The computer knows. Now, there are some problems with that. First of all, this year election, if you live in the United States, and if you don't, you're watching from the outside wondering what's going to happen, like this is crazy stuff. But they get this. They are buying that data. In fact, there was a Wall Street Journal article this morning talking about how these political guys are using this aggregated data to figure out how to market, and they're going to do it through Facebook. Because they can segment their audience and they can figure out who likes them, who doesn't like them, who's undecided, who wants gun control, who doesn't, who wants public education, who doesn't, who wants core curriculum, who doesn't. I mean, everything. Now, the other side of that is that the hacker has access to that same data. Why? It's in the cloud. And anybody who has your data and has that much data can be you. They can manipulate you on the political side and the marketing side. They can be you on the hacker side. So much so that nobody would ever know the difference. This is bad news. Now, here's the last thing I want to mention about this. Social media is growing in value by getting us to lower our guard. Now, what do I mean by that? If you think 20 years ago, it was hard to put something online, like your picture, or a blog post, or anything that had your name. It was kind of scary. Like, I don't want to put this out there. People will know me. Right? But today, people put anything online, right? Like these kids are sending naked pictures of themselves all over the internet all the time. I mean, people that don't even look good do this. That's supposed to be funny. It's not that funny though, is it? Because if you're willing to do that, what won't you send? People will send anything over the internet. And social media's job is to get them to be less and less concerned about what they send out online. That means that all the end users in your organization are being dumbed down in terms of what it is they can and can't send across the internet. And that goes across their social life as well as their business life. And people just aren't thinking anymore that all this data actually does matter. Remember, data is a currency. Forget about Bitcoin and blockchains of other types. Data itself is a currency. It's worth money online, and with it I can manipulate you, I can beat you. And anything that you're authorized to do, I can do too, and pretend I'm you. And I can then make decisions that are not authorized that you probably wouldn't have made and get people to do them. That's what Cato's about. That's what invoice fraud's about. And that's what all kinds of things are happening out there. It's a problem. In fact, there was a financial organization in New York City that I'm familiar with about a year or so ago. A woman got on Facebook, 25-year-old woman, started friending all the men in the investment organization. She got 75% of these guys to give her information, insider trading information from their financial systems. 75%. But get this, 13% of the men gave her the passwords to their systems. Can you believe that? Now, how do we know that? Because they published it in the Wall Street Journal, because the president of the company hired this woman to test her employees. It's a test. It was a white hat hacking test, and they failed. Number 4 is the mindset that we're behind a firewall, we have passwords, everything's safe. I can put whatever I want on Facebook because I've got my profile set up so it's secure. Now, you and I probably know this, but nobody that works in your organization probably does, but passwords don't work. I won't belabor the point, they just don't. And then we have the insider threat, if all that didn't work, that employees steal stuff. Employees can be bought off. They can be bribed, and they will be. Number 6, we have nation-state sponsored. This is what was happening with North Korea, potentially, in the SWIFT hack in Bangladesh. It's happening, it's growing. Now, I used to not worry about number 7, and that was the cyber warfare. But you know what? Now, it's changing. I mean, if you think about it, China, Russia, North Korea is an exception, but China and Russia, and now Germany, have you read that? Germany is really growing in the hacker talents and technology, so they're at a forefront here of stealing. But those guys want to steal information. They don't want to put you out of business. They just want to steal from you, and the more you prosper, the more they prosper. But then when you start talking about organizations like ISIS, it's a whole different thing. Because they hate everybody that's not them. And they will take down people. And so we have a Wall Street Journal article out that says, expect, they said, the next 10 years, I don't think it's 10 years. I think we're talking just a few years, where we see things that are more warfare-like, more take things down kind of things. Ransomware is kind of like that. I mean, when you take over a hospital with ransomware, think about your stock trading and things like that being shut down by ransomware. How long can any organization stand that? Now, there is an app that you have for this, before we get into the next little section here. And the app question in there is, how many of you have a organized training program that you're sending all your people through so they understand what fraud looks like and what not to do and so forth. So if you can just pull out your app and go to that and vote on that, that would be helpful. Now, I'm going to press on, though, and they'll flash up the results after you do that. But I want to mention compliance here for a moment. I guess I should have the GLBA symbol up there, or whatever it is that your country, wherever you're from, has in terms of compliance. But the compliance I'm really concerned about here is not so much bank compliance, but your customers. But the bank matters too, because the bank and the small business, the medium business are working together. You're funding them, you're lending to them, you're their lifeblood. And there's this thing happening out there. Oh good, 100% of you have end user required to go through it that voted. And probably any of you didn't want to vote because it would look bad. But anyway, you should, right? It's sort of the law, isn't it? But here's the thing. When business people start thinking that compliance is security, it's a problem. Now, if you look at small business, right? They're doing credit cards. I do credit cards. I'm a small business, right? I have a credit card processing relationship with my bank. But being PCI compliance, I can tell you, does not mean that I'm secure at all. In fact, I know that because when my PCI compliance thing came up, I'm a one-person company. I have 2 daughters that work for me part-time, and that's it. That's how big our company is. So I'm on the phone with my compliance person, asking him what all I have to do. And I'm not going to tell you what bank I bank with, because this is obviously not a good thing. But I'm going through the stuff, and I'm like, I got to have a security policy. I'm a one-person company, and you want me to have a big security policy and like a user awareness training program. Like, I'm the CISSP, I don't need a security awareness program, and there's nobody in my company that handles financial data except me, and it's done in the cloud by a processor. So the guy says to me, let me just send you a policy. Oh, okay. Now, he doesn't know I'm a security guy, but he just sends me the policy. He doesn't ask me to read it. He just says, just save this to your hard drive, and you're good. Oh, I'm good. I'm done. I'm PCI compliant. There it is. Or what happens when a big giant company out there is PCI compliant? Hannaford Food comes to mind. They get hacked, and then the PCI police come along and say, you're no longer compliant. What does that mean? I was compliant, I got hacked, now I'm not compliant. What does that mean? It means that whoever said that thought that PCI compliance, or GLBA, or HIPAA, or Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX, or whatever it is, that if you had that in place that you would be secure. It's not true. And we need to educate people that we have to be compliant. You gotta be, it's the law. But you gotta be secure too, and they're not the same thing. A lot of policy is paperwork, and a lot of security is a lot more than paperwork. Nobody really has this covered. Looking out there, it's a problem. Now, I want to tell you about this one thing. And this, hopefully you already understand this because you're in security, I think you probably do. But I want to give you a simple illustration, and I give this to business people all the time, like every week. And when I show them this, it's like their eyes pop out. They have never heard this before. So I want you to just sort of take some notes on this. It's in my book too. But bring it back to your CFO and your, people who are in the, VP, EVP type roles in your company, so they can understand what it is you're talking about. Because the biggest complaint I get from business people is, I don't understand. I don't understand what security is. So here's the big mistake. Now, I want you just to put yourself in the shoes of somebody in your organization who is high up, who is not a technical security person. Okay? You're that person. Just think that way. What would they think? Okay? Now, I call this the principle of the house, and I use this to explain how does security work? Like what makes something secure? Now, last night, I was here in the hotel. My wife and my 7 kids were at home. I want to tell you that we had 5 break-ins in our neighborhood. 5 homes broken into in my neighborhood a couple of months ago, and 2 men were chased on foot by police and apprehended last week. Now, I live in a safe neighborhood. I mean, this is like new stuff. We live out in the country. The houses are spread out. Big 5-acre lots. I mean, there was never a threat. But all of a sudden, these homes are being broken into. But last night, when I laid down to go to sleep, I wasn't afraid. Because I have not violated these principles. And I told my family, I really don't think our house will get hit. I'm not saying it's 100% secure because nothing is, but I bet we're 95%. And if we're 95%, they're just going to go hit our neighbors, not us. It'll be okay. Now, what is it that makes a home secure? Think about your home for a moment. Okay, mine's in the country. It's safe, but it's not because people are breaking in. Now, if we think about what we do to protect our home, start thinking, right? What's in my home? Maybe I have an alarm. Maybe I have a dog. Maybe I have some kind of firearm. Maybe I have, I don't know, what do you have? Well, you come up with a list, and it looks like this. I have doors, I lock them. I have windows, I lock those. I've got maybe a fence around my house. I have an alarm, I have monitoring, people watching it, watching my alarm system. I have dogs, I have 3 dogs. I have 3 German Shepherd man-eating dogs. We have guns in North Carolina, lots of them. All my kids carry guns. I carry a gun. My wife shot a deer out the window the other day. It is bow season. And we live across the street from the police station, believe it or not. Not our house, but our neighborhood. Right across the street. We still have 5 crickets. And of course we have insurance. Now, here's the thing. A lot of us have a lot of these things. A lot of people that work in your company have a lot of these things. But these are not the things that make your place secure. What is it? What makes something secure? That's the question you gotta ask. And it turns out there is a system that makes security work. And it's made of 3 components: protection, detection, response. Hopefully that's not news. Protection, detection, response. Now, I do want to take a poll here, but I recognize that you're all security people, so it's really an easy test, but I want you to raise your hand, okay? So everybody raise their hand just so we practice. Okay, you gotta have more participation. Everybody has to raise their hand, just so I know you can raise your hand, okay? And if you didn't raise your hand, I assume your headset's just not working. Okay, good. All right. Now, what I'd like to do is vote on which one of these is most important. Protection, detection, response. You need all 3. It's a time sequence. It always goes from left to right. Every time. It has to. But one of them is most important. One has to be nearly perfect. So which one is it? How many people, raise your hand if you think, how many people think it is response? Response is the most important column. Okay, we got a few votes. Less than I would have thought. What about detection? Okay, got a few. And what about column 1? Protection? That should be everyone else. But some of you didn't vote. Did you guys vote? Okay, if you voted for column 2, you are right. Okay? It is not column 1. Look at your home. Like, how hard is it to break through one of your windows? Windows are built to keep the heat out. Keep the air conditioning in. Keep the bugs out. Keep the babies in. Keep the neighbors out. But they don't keep criminals out. Neither do doors, or fences, or locks. None of that stuff keeps anybody out. But detection. Detection is the thing that signals the response. The response needs to be decent. The response is the second most important thing. You need enough protection to signal response so it can be detected. The detection has to be nearly perfect. If the alarm on your car goes off too often, you ignore it. If your house alarm keeps going off, you shut it off. If the fire alarm keeps going off every time you cook, you shut it off. You don't even think about it. It's the one that has to be right. And when it goes off, there better be a timed response plan. That means that your organization is prepared to talk to the media. That's part of your response plan. But you know, response has to be faster than that in the computer world. It should be so fast that I can detect ransomware when it comes in before it opens. That's how fast detection should be. And the faster that detection is, the better your security is. If it has to wait until you see something, it is too long. If it takes 14 months, like the FBI says, it's too long. If it takes a couple of seconds, it's good. Detection technologies are happening, but people have to be able to detect too. We have to have detection. Now, how are computer systems protected? Gartner Group says 80% of the security budget is spent on passwords, firewalls, and encryption, or column 1. Hey, you need all that. And I have to say, in the financial industry, we have better than average. We do. There's a lot of good fraud detection technology that's being used. But I have to tell you, your clients don't have it. The small business, the medium businesses, Gartner Group says 90% of them are living in column 1. All of your clients. So I know you're responsible for your internal systems primarily, but somehow get the message to somebody to get it out to your clients. Because security threatens to destroy small and medium business. And if small and medium business goes away, you're going to have any clients. They need to know this. And because of that, We've got all these statistics about how many systems are being affected every day. But this is what security should look like. Security needs to be a matrix of protection, detection, and response across people, technology, and physical infrastructure. They all have to work together. It's never about a firewall. It's never about intrusion prevention technology or a SIM technology. It's the orchestrated working of these 9 boxes together so that people and technology are working together to detect something and respond to it before it's too late. And I'm telling you, the business people don't get this. They assume that you have it protected. See, here we go. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to run through very quickly, and I won't have time to talk about them all, some mindsets that need to be built. Because you know what? You can buy all the technology you want, you can buy all kinds of cool stuff across the hall here, and put all that stuff in place, but I got to tell you, and you probably already know this, it's not going to stop all the hackers. So let's quickly run through it, okay? First of all, people need to understand that data is money. All data is money. You can never have an end user sitting there going, well, this stuff's not that important. Because data aggregation, deep machine learning, and artificial intelligence make all data relevant. Because remember, it's being aggregated. And the more data I have, the more I can become you. Data is money. Number 2, compliance is not security. Compliance is the law. But it's not security. Security is the ability to detect and respond before it's too late. And sure, that means there are policies and procedures and training and certain types of technology. But having the compliance paperwork in place does not make a company secure. Number 3, security is an enabler. How many, you don't need to raise your hand, but how many of your end users think that you are an obstacle to doing business? Like you're in the way. Another password change, another policy, another security thing that I don't want to have to deal with. If they could just stop thinking about it like that and start thinking about it like when a race car, a NASCAR driver gets into his car. Like, does he say, I don't want to wear the fireproof suit. I don't want to wear the helmet. It gets in the way when I make the turn around the corner. Right? They don't say that. In fact, I gotta believe they like getting new helmets and new fire suits and new other stuff that makes it secure. Because it allows them to drive faster and compete harder. And your people ought to be saying the same thing. Man, I can bank in the airport and be safe if I got the right stuff in place, and it'd be stupid not to. I can do stuff on the internet in this room on a public network if I've got the right stuff in place. But if I don't have the right stuff in place, I could be in big trouble. Number 4, people need to understand that all data in the cloud can be gotten to. And anything that you really want to be a secret shouldn't be out there. Now, some stuff has to be out there, like how much money you have in the bank. It's digital. But you don't have to put all that stuff on Facebook, and you shouldn't. And the more stuff they put out there, the more people can become them and can manipulate your organization by being them. It's especially true of executive management. People can get in. As Mr. Giuliani said this morning, when they do a penetration test, when they try to hack into a company, only 2 did they fail at. Now, I would like to know why they failed. Because when I meet a company that does a pen test to see if they're secure, I immediately say, if your pen test fails, get another one, because that means it's not good enough. If the hackers failed to get in, that means that they were dumb hackers. Because good hackers can always get in. Number 6, you should expect them to be in. That means when you're doing an assessment, and by the way, when I talk about assessment, I'm thinking about risk assessment. What's the likelihood? What's the impact? And I'm looking at data, who touches data, how it gets transmitted between where and where, and what the likelihood is that it will be compromised. And I'm looking for symptoms of activity that signify problem. By the way, most assessments don't look like that. Most of them deal with ports and technology and protocols and stuff like that, and that's not the way assessments should look. In fact, only 15% of assessments on average in our industry get acted on. 15%. Now, if I ask a room full of technology consultants that do assessments, what percentage of assessments have urgent issues, they tell me 95%. 95% have major issues, 15% get acted on. Why is that? It's because there's a disconnect in the technical writing compared to what a business person who gives the allowance, gives the budget approval to do it. There's a disconnect. The financial guy does not understand what's written in the document, and therefore they don't act. And then you scratch your head and you wonder, why aren't they approving this? And then number 7, be ready to respond. Technologically, automated response. Physically, personnel response. All that needs to be ready. We should be thinking all the time. It could happen any second. It's probably happening right now. Because all major companies, as was mentioned this morning, according to the FBI, and actually Mike McConnell said it before James Humphrey did, that all businesses, all major businesses have been hacked into. Some know it, some don't. I want to just conclude with kind of an illustration that woke me up one day about what it really means to respond. Again, it's a physical illustration from my own life. And it happened when I was a teenager. Actually, I guess I was 20. I think I was 21. And I was responsible for training lifeguards. That's what I did for a living. I worked in a camp, swimming instructor. And one day, my camp director asked me to take the people to the beach, to the ocean. So I said, okay, I'll take them to the ocean. So I took them, a couple of bus loads of kids. We got there early in the morning, nobody there yet. New York Beach, so it gets crowded. But nobody was there yet. It was the ocean, the waves were big, the water up there is cold, and I mean really cold, like in the 60s. They're still swimming in it. And so I'm standing on the beach, and I got my whistle, like a good lifeguard should. And all of a sudden, I see this woman. She's a junior lifeguard. She's been trained by me, and she's caught in a riptide. She's on her way out to sea. And she starts yelling to me, hey, I need help. Now, she wasn't panicking. She was good enough at least not to do that. But she's headed out to sea. And I'm watching her, and I'm looking at these huge waves, and I'm thinking, gee, is way out there. I don't know if I can swim out there. And I think if I dove in the water, I might drown myself. And I started thinking, what do I do? I totally locked up, didn't even expect such a thing. All my life I've been a pool lifeguard, standing 10 feet away from somebody. I pull people out, no big deal. 10 feet there, drowning, take the ring toss, it's usually hanging on the wall right here, or shepherd's crook, and toss it out to them and pull them in, no big deal. But she's way out there. And all of a sudden, this big guy comes running by me. He's got this big orange torpedo in his hand, which you've seen these in the ocean. He dives in there, because he is an ocean lifeguard, swims out there and rescues her. And he never said anything to me, but the fact is that I was not prepared to respond to an ocean rescue. I didn't have the equipment, I had never done it, I had no idea what I was doing, I shouldn't even been there. But this is what I see businesses doing. They are creating, using, and transmitting the heart of the business. The very thing that your company makes money with. All the assets are digital. And they have no idea that people out there are every day trying to get it. And until they see it with their eye, they're not going to respond. Because they assume that everything's okay. So I'm going to leave you with this. I hope you'll go back and you'll take a look at what your company does with data, how they assess, do they have an impact likelihood graph? Are the executives getting that information? Are they taking action with it? And do your end users actually understand what it is they're dealing with? Does your user awareness training actually deal with the value of data all the way as far as it goes to Facebook and everything else they do online? Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back over to Ruben.